UFC 316 answered a number of questions we had. Could Sean overcome Merab? Could Kayla capture UFC gold? Well, guys, we got the answer to all of our questions at UFC 316, headlined by Merab versus Sean for the second time. And I'll get straight into it. I don't know if this fight actually needed to happen again. The first fight was essentially an indication of how dominant Merab is, how his skill set is one that kind of completely destroying Sean's. And there was always a question of, could Sean striking deal with Merab's, ferocity, his tenacity, his cardio? And the answer is no, it can't. He could catch Merab with a punch and a clean strike that could, shut off his lights, but that's a 1 in 100, maybe a 10 in 100 opportunity for Sean. Merab's consistent pressure, his consistent fight, his consistent element to raise his levels is one that continues to even surprise me. A big fan of Merab, have been going into this fight. The only issue I had with Merab was potentially the success that he has achieved may have knocked him off the path of greatness that he was on. And the answer that we got at UFC 316 is that no, it has not. He is still as determined. He is still as hungry. He is still the man who works probably the hardest in the UFC, and he shows it time and time again. Absolutely dominating performance. The activity, the cardio, the work on the ground was more than impressive. As you can see, the 12 takedowns that were attempted against Sean, he hit nearly 50%. The barrage of strikes, the ground strikes, the submission to end the fight. I mean, Sean came in like he'd gone to the mountains, he's rehabilitated, he's quit drugs, he's done all of these things to beat Merab, and all of those things that he did all led to him losing in a worse fashion than he did in the first fight, a fight that he claimed he was injured in. And so you have to think, what does a defeat like this do to Sean? Where does he go from here? My focus right now is on Merab. What a fighter. He is establishing himself as the bantamweight king. And I don't know how you can argue it. Let's just take a look at his fight history right here. Beat Sean twice, a former champion in his own right. Beat Umar, who was one of the most feared competitors. Beat Henry Cejudo, double UFC champion. Peter Yan, a former champion. Jose Aldo, a former champion. Marlon Moraes, who we know all about. And that leads up to an absolutely amazing 13-fight win streak for Merab. He absolutely deserves all his accolades. He is somebody who appears to be very humble. He continues to want to dominate the bantamweight division. There's been discussions over a Umar rematch. I would leave that for a fight or two, just to give Umar a chance to get his game plan in order, because again, Merab was dominating then as well. It would be good to see Corey get an opportunity. I think he presents a slightly different challenge. Do I think Merab beats him? Most likely, but I would like to see that fight against two absolute beasts in the bantamweight division. What more can I say about Merab? I'm absolutely in awe of how he goes out and does his job. Yes, it's not the most exciting fighting style for some, but for me, I really do appreciate the hard work. I appreciate the ferocity. I appreciate the intensity he brings to the octagon time and time again. Sean, again, there's questions about where does he go. There's a number of opportunities out there for him. I would love to see him run it back with Aljo, especially with Aljo saying he wasn't 100%. I would like to see that fight, to be honest with you. I think two relatively big names in the bantamweight division, and that could be a really good co-main event for a pay-per-view, or it could headline a fight night. I really do see it being a co-main on a pay-per-view, but you've got options there. But yeah, congratulations to Merab, absolute champ. And I think if we could get him with Sanhagen as the next fight, I think we would be in for a treat. Next up, the second big question we had to ask was, could Juliana Pena hold off the ferocity and the absolute talent of Kayla Harrison? The answer was no, and it was a big, decisive no. Again, Juliana is not the most skilled MMA fighter. I'm going to just be honest there. I think it was something that Matt Brown spoke about before the fight. I think that's clear. One thing, again, I do respect about her is her heart, her tenacity, and she's game. She will fight. She will talk a good game, which buys and gets fans invested, whether you like her or hate her. But the clear quality difference between her and Kayla was stark. And it was one that I think we all eventually knew Kayla would come through. And she did in flying fashion. Second round, Kimura showed her quality, showed her talent. and she was destined to be a UFC champion, two-time Olympic gold medalist. Now she sits at the top of the UFC bantamweight division. She will be going into competition against Amanda Nunes next. That fight has been confirmed, and it's one that I think we're all looking forward to, but I don't know to what level. I mean, Amanda hasn't been active. She did retire, then she's come back. I don't think the build up necessarily has taken shape or form yet. And I think the build up to a fight like this needs to be sensational. There needs to be a little bit of bad blood. The backstory needs to be told of how these two were in the same team and now they're fighting against each other. This is something that needs to be told. It needs to be reported on. We need to have a real spectacle for two of the best women fighters today. I still have Valentina Shevchenko as my number one. You can argue with that if you want to, but these two are at the top of their game and they're intense. And I think the competition of being the absolute best will definitely deliver a massive fight. For Juliana, she can definitely have a fight in the UFC, and I think she will always entertain me with how she talks a good game before the fight. I've got to be honest with you. I love how she comes in ready to fight, but I don't see her getting back to the title, if I'm being honest with you. And so there's a decision for her to make, but being a two-time UFC champion is nothing to be sniffed at. And again, she's always been entertaining in my eyes, mainly outside of the ring than inside of the ring. But got to give my hats off for her tenacity and her ferocity. Kayla, on the other hand, as mentioned, she's undefeated in the UFC. Four former or current UFC fighters that she's fought in her last four, and she's unbeaten in those four, latest being Pena, and absolutely dominating. Vieira as well, she was dominating. Holly Holm, she was dominating. And she continues to show her quality. Her biggest test is her next one, and we will see how she performs. Following up from the co-main event, Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pfeiffer. And again, this was a talk, and again, this was a story of how tough Kelvin Gastelum is. I honestly thought that Pfeiffer would have cleaned him out of this fight in the first round, but Kelvin stayed in it. He actually got better as the fight went on. And, you know, it's honestly really, really hard for someone like Kelvin who sits between the welterweight and middleweight division. And honestly, he doesn't sit pretty in either of them just because of his stature, just because he lacks the height and range and elements that some of the bigger fighters have at a middleweight, but he's also potentially too big for welterweight and, you know, maybe caught out with the speed advantage and he can't really cut that amount of weight anymore. So again, Kelvin showed his heart, his grit, his determination. Joe was really good with that right hand, but I do struggle to see what he has after that right hand, and he was caught out in the fight before this, so I don't know how much he's actually improved. But again, he seems game for most fights, but I do think if he comes against high level opposition, he may run into a problem. Next up, Mario Bautista versus Patchy Mix. This was one I was looking forward to. Patchy Mix, obviously the former Bellator champion, has talked a good game coming into the UFC. Obviously took this fight on a couple of weeks' notice against Mario Bautista, who we know is probably not UFC fans' favorite fighter at the moment. The fight against Jose Aldo, to name one example. So this was looking like, you know, Patchy Mix coming in, being the fresh fighter, could potentially be a bit of a fan favorite against Mario Bautista. But the fans and myself really never got an opportunity to really support Patchy Mix because Batista was on job. He was really, really good with his striking consistently. Hitting Patchy Mix was very, very quick to get in and out, or striking range for Patchy Mix was very, very fast. It didn't feel like Patchy Mix could catch up with the speed that Bautista was throwing out, and it took him essentially to the end of the fight for him to really, really get into it. There was discussions around him being a 5-round fighter, obviously with his championship experience. However, yeah, you need to start fast, and this is the same thing that we saw with Pitbull against Jair. You really need to come in and make a quick impression on the UFC fighters, because now Patchy Mix, you know, after this fight and potentially one more, could have been in a title hunt. Now he's going to have to start a very, very long climb back to title relevancy, because essentially the UFC and the fans are treating him like a joke. Not the UFC, but the UFC fans are treating him like a joke after that performance. And he's going to have to work his way up. That was not a good debut by any stretch of the imagination. I'm hoping he can perform better in his second fight, but right now a lot of fans will be looking at him being a bust, and the UFC, however much stock they would have put in bringing him into the UFC, will be expecting a lot more. Looking at Mario Bautista, who won the fight, and we cannot forget that he actually won the fight, is on a very good win streak of his own. We've spoken about the win against Patchy Mix, against Aldo, Ricky Simon, but you continue to see that he has gone unbeaten in the last, let me see here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 8 fights, 8 fight unbeaten streak. Very, very impressive. And he seems to have learned a lot of lessons from early on in his UFC career. Again, going on to the opening fight for the main card, Vicente Luque versus Kevin Holland. And I wasn't sure who to pick for this fight. I did think from my previous prediction about Vicente Luque, when I predicted him to lose, he actually won. And the fight before them, when he got absolutely decimated, I honestly was of the opinion that he was on the decline. And this is the fight which cements to me that he's on the decline. Very slow, very sluggish. Kevin Holland found his way into the fight after the first couple of minutes where Vicente Luque looked pretty good. It showed that, wait, Kevin Holland can actually match his striking. Kevin Holland isn't really fearful of his power. And Kevin Holland has got those long, gangly limbs, which is going to cause a problem for this Vicente Luque. And they did. And while the fight was standing, he had a number of problems with Kevin Holland. Once the fight got to the ground in the second round, it was only a matter of time before Kevin Holland got his submission in, and that's exactly what he did. Anaconda choke to end the fight. And listen, we've spoken about how streaky Kevin Holland can be. It's not always been the best of times with him, but with the performance against Vicente Luque, Gunnar Nelson, he seems to be back on the right path. He called out Colby Covington after the fight, and I think that would be a very, very exciting fight. Colby, who is on a awful streak at the moment, and Kevin, who, like he said, he loves to beat up sorry fighters, so this could be a brilliant fight for him and for both men, and I'm sure it would sell a lot of tickets and garner a lot of interest. But Kevin Holland continues in his winning ways, a change from prior fights, and let's see how long this may continue. Moving on to the prelims, one of my favorite fighters at the moment, Joshua Van, absolutely brilliant performance against Silva. Silva was game. Let's not get that twisted. He always is game, a little bit reckless, as I mentioned in the past, but Van was slick. He was accurate. He was what the flyweight division needs. And I say that with the utmost respect. The flyweight division is led by an exceptional champion, and a champion that's going to be going up against Kai Kara France very soon, but they need fresh blood. And Joshua Van is that fresh blood. He is somebody that I think can really cause a lot of noise in the flyweight division. I really like his game. I love his striking. It's crisp, it's clean. And listen, the future is bright for him. I really want to see him go up against someone big. And we just got news that he will be going up against Brandon Royval, with Manel Camp going out injured. This is a big, big fight for Joshua Van, because he can climb up to, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, number 2 or number 1 ranked in the flyweight division. That is the opportunity that will come with a victory against Brandon Royval. And can he do it? I believe he can. I want him to do it. No offense to Brandon Royval, but he's been near the championship a number of times. He hasn't been able to get the job done. And we've got Joshua Van there rating for the opportunity. He is on a 4-fight winning streak and continues to show his quality. Royval will be his biggest challenge. He has got the 1 loss against Charles Johnson, but from my opinion, Charles Johnson is a very game fighter. And again, it's up to Joshua Van to show that he's learned from that little blimp on his record and to push on against the biggest challenge that he will face in the flyweight division before coming up against the likes of a Camp or a Kai Kara France. Royval is that next guy, and he has gone toe-to-toe with a number of those fighters, so this is a big opportunity for Joshua Van. Following on from that, Muzrakanov, again, absolutely brilliant performance. I think he's going to be a problem in the light heavyweight division. And he literally took out Ribeiro with the greatest of ease. It looked like at the beginning of the fight that he might struggle a little bit, but that was quickly washed away within the first like 30 seconds to a minute. Established his dominance, established the center of the ring, and when he started delivering the punches that he was delivering, it was going to be a quick night, and that's exactly what we got. Muzrakanov will be a problem in the light heavyweight division, and I'm going to love to see his next matchup. A bit of a boring fight in the heavyweight division. Sees Acosta win. Was expecting a little bit more from Spivak. I really want to see either of these fighters take their game to the next level, because if they're going to be continuously delivering fights like this, I don't see a championship fight or a top 5 fight in their future. The last person I really want to call out is Gustafsson. Absolutely impressive performance. A number of 26-30s on the scorecards. Was absolutely dominant. The power he was bringing into the ring. Again, Chaos Williams is not someone that you can get out easily, but you could see that he is going to be a problem for the rest of the division. Absolutely impressive from him. The welterweight division needs to take note of Gustafsson, and he will be a absolute problem. Guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I want to hear from you. What was your fight of the night? What do you think should be in Merab's next fight? What do you think of the Kayla versus Amanda fight as well? Let me know who you think is going to win that. I want to hear all your thoughts after UFC 316. Guys, I'll catch you soon. It's been EDA. Peace.